So one of the things the scholars stress on is that once the khutbah starts, it's pretty much almost like the prayers. So we don't engage in our phones, our messages, or even salam when people enter. All that should be ignored, to the point that the Prophet ﷺ said, whomever fiddles with the pebbles in front of him, then his Jumu'ah is void. Doesn't mean that he has to pray the Jumu'ah again, but it means the reward and effort that they have done to come is gone. Right? They fulfilled the fard, but the rewards associated with it is gone. So I kind of remind, inshallah, everybody that when the Imam comes out, we're supposed to listen. It's almost as if we're in prayers. We benefit from that, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
السلام عليكم. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله الحمد لله ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وهو حبيبنا وقدوتنا وإمامنا ونحن مأمورون عن طريق القرآن أن نصلي ونسلم عليه اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد أما بعد. In this khutbah, we wanted to focus on our purpose, on our identity as Muslims, and we'll talk about that a little. And I entitled it The Neglected Obligation, Building Community and Establishing our collective responsibilities in the deen. So before beginning, there's some preliminary work we have to do just to clarify the air. The concept of fard al-wajib, without getting into the details, what's an obligation in the deen? Firstly, we have to understand what is the end game behind an obligation in the deen. And when we come to like a general understanding, we get the understanding that the obligation in the deen has to do with tahqiq al-masalih. It has to do with realizing what's beneficial for us in the dunya and in the akhirah. And that understanding comes after a series of reflections of the scholars of Islam. It's not that someone just comes on the scene and begins to philosophize on Islam. That's something that was understood since the appearance of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. وَمَا أَرْسَلْتُكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And so when we go into the meaning of what does nubuwwah mean itself, some of the ulama say that nubuwwah itself can be translated as al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. And in this case, to command the people to what's good, to command the people to what's beneficial, to command the people to what's in their interest as a collective, not just as individuals, but also as individuals. And to warn them and prohibit them and so on and so forth about that which is destructive, that which is harmful, that which is problematic in the dunya and in the hereafter. That scale is important because in an age where there's no compass, there's no truth, there's no rule of law, everyone comes up with their own ideas. So one of the qualities of this ummah, the ummah of Muhammad, is the reality of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, or calling to that which is beneficial and warning the people against that which is harmful, clarifying what's good, and making sure that the people understand what's detrimental to their lives. And if that quality disappears, then a major characteristic, a major quality of this ummah disappears. And it's impossible to be the ummah of Muhammad without that quality, alayhi salatu wasalam. Banu Israel, they weren't a people that had that quality. And so we see a long discourse in Surah Al-Baqarah so that we understand those lessons about the qualities of Banu Israel so that we don't have those qualities among ourselves. And one of the major qualities that they had that was problematic was to go against the Anbiya, to go against the guidance that Allah wa ta'ala brought them. And so in going against the guidance that Allah wa ta'ala brought them, by default, it meant that they were going against their own interests. By default. In the dunya and in the akhirah. Ali Imran, Surah Ali Imran follows up. And it gives us an understanding not only of the reality of Banu Israel, but also the followers of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Almost as if to say that when the Quran is talking about غَيْرُ مَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ, it's clarified in Surah Al-Baqarah, who's al-Maghdubi alayhim, in Surah Ali Imran, who's وَلَا الضَّالِينَ. We have textual evidence for that. Does that mean that we marginalize the followers of other religions? No. It means that we have some sort of standard and guidelines so that we ourselves are not confused on the issue. Especially when it comes to interfaith engagement, interfaith dialogue, interfaith cooperation, interfaith anything. We don't interfaith on an issue in which there's moral responsibility for us to establish what's right and wrong. There's no politics in the world that's going to change that reality. No formality, no fear, because we're accountable to Allah in that regard. That's important. That's important because if we ourselves silence ourselves to the reality in the name of whatever, you can insert in the blanks 1,000 different reasons why we may not take positions on certain things. If we ourselves do that, then we implode. So we have to have a standard. The other issue is this, that when we look at the idea of building community, people, we really are talking about the reconstruction of the ummah. The stats, they need to be tweaked, updated. Some people like data. When we look at not the stats that we collected, that's the first error. Not the stats, not the statistics that we collected in understanding our condition, but the stats that were collected by the United Nations. So the first thing where we go wrong is we're not even understanding our own condition, so we speak on our own condition. Other people are speaking and describing what our condition is. When they say that roughly 80,000 people were displaced at the end of 2019, we're in 2024. 45.7 million were displaced within their own countries. If we go, that's why I said the stats need to be tweaked. But there's a statement that 2/3 of the world population, you understand what 2/3 is? Okay, this is 2/3 people. These are 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Okay? If I said half, it would be this finger and half of this. But when you say 2/3, and the emotion is to put emphasis on it, it's not for you to close your intellect. Don't argue with me in your mind. Be with me in your heart. When you say 2/3, that means pretty much the majority, more than half. Are Muslims that are world refugees. Add into that economic refugees, political refugees, whatever you want to say. So when we talk about the reality of reconstructing the ummah, where do we begin? Where do we begin in that regard? Because some of us, and we have to correct ourselves because we are collective. We're an ummah. We're not just a bunch of individuals. We don't have the consciousness of the collective in mind. You understand what I'm saying? The term ummah is used in the Quran in multiple ways. Just because you hear the word ummah in one place and in another place doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. In Surah Yusuf, it can mean a period of time. When it's referred to Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, is that he has all the qualities as an ummah unto himself. In another place, it can mean a group of people. But when we talk about our understanding of our identity as Muslims, we're stuck at the level whether I'm Desi, whether I'm Arab. And then the reality of that situation is such that where's the working unity amongst the Desis? Where's the working unity amongst the Arabs? Not to mention any other population, whether it's the African American or whatever. But that's one level of identity. In the society that we live in now, when it comes to our children, they take them to the biological reality of identity and the shahwah. Say, your identity is your desire. And move with your desire as much as you can. That's why the issue of identity, we have to have it clear in our mind. Because there's confusion in this regard. And we'll see what are some of the supports in that regard. So when we look, one of the things that we find in the short period of time that's left, we hope that you have an understanding what's being pointed to here is like, what is our role as a collective? What's our sense of mission? What's our sense of vision? You have a religious director here that can give you the details of the deen. But my responsibility is to say to you, listen, we're on alert. We're on a high alert. From the Sudan to India to New York, we're on high alert. Whether it's rates of Muslim suicide, whether it's rates of divorce. And don't challenge me and say, well, the khutbah is not for bringing problems. And the problem itself is the solution. If the issue is that we have high rates of divorce, and if the issue is that the ummah is based on families, then the corrective is to correct the situation in the family. Don't leave it as though, oh, he's talking about divorce. If the situation is youth on drugs or youth in gangs, which we have, in the suburbs even, youth addicted to drugs or whatever it may be, then the solution is let's look for why it is that that's the case. And usually that breakdown is coming back to the family, to the community. And oh yeah, another thing, we surrendered our responsibility to educate our youth to other people. What did we think was going to happen when we put them in the system? What did we think was going to happen after 10, 15 years of putting them in the public school system and sending them to university? You virtually gave your tarbiyah, your power over your own children, to someone else. Part of that is not the issue to blame anyone. But it's the issue when we start talking about people being displaced. If you don't have a vision to reconstruct, you're not going to go anywhere. We're not building power, people. Our conception of power is title, is money. But we're not building power. That's why so many people are amazed what's taking place in the university systems. Other groups were building power against you while we were fighting in the community among ourselves with lawsuits, with who's in charge, with coming into the masjid parking lot with a Tesla, with fighting within our families. Other people were building power. Pick a group. The Zionists, Hindustava, pick a group. The atheists, pick a group. So when we look at the reality, we can't be playing games anymore. Our communities have to be intentional. Our communities have to have the understanding that we're responsible for that child from the earliest development to the latest development. Not wait till the child hits puberty to give them Islam. We have to start all the way from the beginning. Our responsibility is to know that the marriage contract in Islam has a significant portion that's related to Iman. It's not related just to the mahr and what economic gains are going to be made. It's not just been related that, oh, my son-in-law is going to make X amount of dollars. Where has that gotten us after X amount of years with the high rates of divorce? So the education of the individual and the family is important. When we look at Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayh, to set a foundation for this in the short period of time that's left, he has a section in Riyadh al-Salihin, which Riyadh al-Salihin, in my estimation, I may be wrong on this, in reality is a book of tafsir. We take it lightly. He starts off every chapter with the Quran. So he has a number of different ayat in the section that's dealing with those who call to the good, and then the reality of calling to guidance or misguidance. And we mentioned that one of the qualities of this ummah is enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. So this is very important to our own understanding of ourselves. The first thing he mentions as a zahid, as a person that doesn't have the dunya as his priority, so to speak, in the sense that materialism is not his main focus. That doesn't mean that materialism is not important. But he says that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَادْعُوا إِلَى رَبِّكَ وَادْعُوا إِلَى رَبِّكَ. Encourage and call the people to Allah to know who Allah is. That's the first thing. And it's individualized to your Rabb. You know who Allah is. We're not talking about philosophically, but that sense that Allah takes care of you, the word Rabb is there. And then he follows it up with an ayat with more detail. ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. How should we be dealing with this reality? That we should call to the reality of the deen itself with hikmah. Hikmah demands that we have some sense of understanding priorities. We understand where things belong in their proper place. And then we should do it in such a way which is encouraging the people in their hearts, where they see the goodness, where we're speaking to them in goodness. Then comes the more difficult part. وَتَعَوَّنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. And collaborate, cooperate in all that is good. In the economy, and building your lives, and establishing the basics of the deen. Al-bir is a word that encompasses all that's good. And taqwa, basically, the foundations of the deen. Cooperate with each other in that. Don't argue about the Hanafi madhab is this. This group is saying this in Aqidah. We don't have time to get into that. We can clarify the differences, but here, in order to realize that ta'awun al-awn, supporting each other, we have to have some common ground. And then it's as if to say that all those things have to be in place. We have to have a relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We have to have the right discourse. We have to have a sense of priorities. We have to make sure that we are building each other with our words, not pushing each other apart. We have to have that collaborative, cooperative mode. وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ. That's where the issue of al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar comes in. So that you become an ummah. There's two tafsirs to this, but the idea here is that you become an ummah, not a group. That's one of the tafsirs that calls to what's good. And the reality is that in this ayah, it comes in Surah Ali Imran. During a time when the Muslims were struggling, the Muslims were seriously struggling. There was conflict in Medina. And so then we find that it comes in the context not only of calling the people, but having an understanding about your identity as Muslims first. O you who believe, have taqwa. And then it talks about brotherhood. And then it talks about, remember the time when you were an ummah that was divided. Recall the state of Jahiliyyah, which is Muslims, what? In today's time, fighting each other. In the time before Islam was the Arabs of the Hijaz fighting each other, and how Islam brought them together. And then it warns us against division. In the remaining time, I want to remind you that one of the collective obligations that we have is dafa darar al-muslimin, to protect ourselves from harm. That can't be done to people without leadership. That can't be done without us strategizing and understanding what our priorities are. The other issue that comes, people, is that when we look in the hadith of Nasiha that we don't have time to go into, we have to have clear leadership. Where's the leadership at? Is the leadership the president of the board in the masjid? Is it this organization? Is it the imam? Where's the leadership at? In actuality. The other issue is this. Out of all the money that we raised for Palestine, now we're headed to an election year. How did we build power? Over $60-something million went out to relief in a situation that we know the relief is not going to get there. And then the war chest is left out without anything in it. So in closing, I want to say, our strategic understanding of where we stand is not accurate. We need to sit at the table and really realize what are our priorities on all these levels. We need to really clarify how is it that we can build power. Building power is not inviting a politician into the masjid and then think, well, we're going to give the votes. Our disunity signals to the politicians that we don't have any power. Because if we had that power, we would have been able to stop, whether it was the situation of the Muslims in India, which the Hindustani pushed their policy, or whether it's the situation of the Zionists and what's going on today. The other issue is this. If we don't care for the development of our youth, we keep saying youth, 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 youth. But the development of our youth from the earliest stage to the later stage has to be our priority. Why? Because everywhere we turn, the Muslims are in conflict and in war and in despair. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. One of the closing remarks we can say is the importance of a strong community is not only short of people, not only consultation. لكن أوفوا بالعقود. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لما تقولون ما لا تفعلون. Consistency between what we say and what we do and follow through. That's important. Organizing ourselves properly on those principles. Keeping in mind the internal needs that we have and the external needs that we have. And we're definitely in need of a community that's looking to our best interests. How can we get protection? How can we build ourselves up in the society and have a real impact? And one of the fastest ways is just if our masajid will cooperate. And our brothers and sisters within our masajid, if we would look at ourselves as a working body, I'm not going to say total unity, we would be able to have an impact. We would be able to have an impact, not to mention that it is a command of the Quran. I ask Allah wa ta'ala to forgive us and to aid us and to guide us. And we ask Allah wa ta'ala to protect us, to protect our youth and to protect our iman. And we ask Allah wa ta'ala for those that are oppressed throughout the world. And we ask Allah wa ta'ala for those that are sick. We ask Allah wa ta'ala for those that have passed away. And we ask Allah wa ta'ala to allow us to die in the state of Islam. And for Islam to remain in our community generations after generations. And we ask Allah wa ta'ala to bless this community, to grow it, to make a brotherhood out of it, to grant it strength and insight and wisdom. And we ask Allah wa ta'ala to allow us to be a people that's consistent between what we say and what we do. Aqimus salah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواسوا بالحق وتواسوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم ملك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to thank Shaykh Yusuf for the khutbah. So just a couple announcements regarding a dua. So we have a request for a dua for Sister Irshad Bayjoum. She's the grandmother of the community sister Mihak Amir. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive her. She had passed away in Pakistan. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bestow His mercy upon her. Please remember her in your dua. The other dua goes out to Brother Muhammad Ali. He is a resident of Bridgewater over here. He had a heart surgery, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him complete shifa, a shifa that leaves no ailments, traces of ailments behind it. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just a few announcements for this week. Summer camp registration is still going on. It's going to run June 25th to August 2nd, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Dr. Ahmed is leading that. Registration is still available, so please register. Tonight, there is the Mothers and Daughters glass painting from 7 to 9 p.m. And we are also having a Quran night tonight after Maghrib Salah. There's going to be Sheikh Mustafa Ibrahim, Sheikh Mustafa Ghazi, and Sheikh Walid. Please come. There's going to be refreshments. It's going to be a great night tonight for Quran night. The Mommy and Me event started today. It happened around 10:30 a.m. The second session will be on June 14th. Tomorrow there is a Hajj workshop with Dr. Ahmed at 6 p.m. here. And next Friday on May 24th, we're going to have our Friday halakha night and chai delight. There's going to be the prophetic parenting. It will start after Maghrib. There's also a potluck associated with this that does involve registration. Please register for the potluck. Please also come for the Friday halakha night. All right? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.